Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Adam Golov, Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. DCL serves a broad client base spanning all industries. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Mercy Pilkington, CEO of Author Options, a full-service solutions provider for authors and publishers. Mercy has taught in one of the first all-digital classrooms in the country during her years teaching in a juvenile correctional facility. Without further ado, welcome Mercy.
Hi, Adam. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about monetizing your ebook. And when you signed up for the webinar, you were asked to list something about yourself, your industry or your focus. And it was great to see that we had a good mix of focuses when you're looking at your content and what you can do with it. Earlier this summer, I believe, we had a different webinar. DCL partnered with Bowker to produce a webinar called Marketing and Publicity for Independent Authors. And you can actually access that webinar in the Webinar Archives section of the DCL website. And I strongly suggest you do that at a different time. That one was really on promoting. Today we're talking about monetizing. And the interesting thing is, while those two concepts are not the same thing, they almost rely on each other so heavily that you can't have one without the other one. You can't monetize content that you haven't promoted and put in front of people, and at the same time, if you're promoting content, you're hoping to produce a revenue stream of it. So when we say monetizing, we're really looking at different aspects of what you can do with content. First is that you sell and hopefully make a profit by distributing content that you hold the rights to. This could be your space cowboy romance series, it could be your master's thesis, it could be news archived articles from your company's website, and more. You want to spread ideas contained within your document or your ebook because it could lead to further sales, further profit, or other revenue streams for you or your company. And we consider that using this document of some kind as almost like your industry calling card. And again, it doesn't matter if you're a fiction author or if you're the CEO of a company that has really great blog posts going up each week, for example. And finally, another strategy to monetize your content is to sell ad space or produce product reviews on your company website, your blog, or other locations. And that lets people basically pay to use your traffic. We're not looking at paid reviews in terms of paying for a positive comment on a product or a book or another article, but basically leveraging your existing social media and website traffic so that someone who doesn't have that kind of traffic can benefit from it. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide. So what is this content that you're going to monetize? Right off the bat, it could be what we already understand to be an ebook. And again, that can be fiction or nonfiction, but basically that standalone file could be part of a series. It can be a book that you either sell from your own website or that you release to distributors and that you pay a royalty share. So that's one form. Blog and blog to book. So again, we're looking at trying to earn revenue streams off of your existing blogs. If you are a standalone blogger who writes for yourself, that could be selling ad space. At the same time, if you are a larger company or larger entity and you've basically contracted or paid people to write for your blog or your website, you may want to monetize on articles and things that they've written for your website as long as your contracts allow you to do so as the rights holder. Another option there is to take existing blog pieces, articles, and other posts and compile those into an ebook or even a print book. And a lot of people have had success doing that. One of the really overlooked forms of content that can be monetized is archived content. So whether your company has old news articles or even old photographs, for example, if you're a news agency or a company that was kind of leading the way in tech startup, for example, you may be sitting on historical content that is of interest to an audience. So there's no reason not to digitize that content or take the previous files, whether you've had them on a website or whether you've had these literally stored in the basement in a file cabinet. It might be great material that people will actually pay to read. Podcasts are another great place that you can look at revenue stream. If you've already got audio files of things that you've shared, why not compile those into an audiobook file and market them as one standalone file? And that way you're reaching a horribly underserved audience. Audiobook fans, even for nonfiction content, they basically don't have enough to read. There's a shockingly low percentage of titles actually are released in audiobook format. So if you have podcasts, you may be sitting on a wealth of content that is basically not reaching an audience that is already hungry for new titles. You may have videos that you've produced in-house, whether they were meant to be shared online or whether they were just simply information that you kept within the company. Those can also be bundled and made into a digital format, especially if they're already on tape or CD, depending on how long ago you made these. And you can release those as a video file, so even though it's not what we consider a traditional ebook, it would still be marketed and monetized the same way. And finally, one of the most exciting things that you probably may be surprised to find is so exciting are academic papers and theses. Again, we have so much content that is stored locked away in archives, in file cabinets, and old floppy disks, because that's how old they are. And you can actually find ways to reach an audience with that content, especially through academic libraries. And depending on the nature of the research, there may be whole new audiences for it now that haven't been reached with it. I do know of an author currently who is at work on publishing his master's thesis. It happened to have been a personal event where he has spent time as a teenager in a drug rehab facility. And basically it's all the events surrounding that. Now, of course, it's written in AP style, it's cited, it was his graduate thesis. And so it's kind of dry for a public consumption audience. So what he's doing right now, he's digitizing it and to sell it as an ebook, marketed specifically to social workers, educators, mental health professionals, and people in that realm. And then we'll be taking the revenue stream from that production and using it to spend the time and energy with a ghostwriter and an editor to produce a reader version. So basically to make a mass market version of the same story that is not quite so dry and not quite so academic. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, the traditional book, and this is a concept that I was really impressed in this previous webinar I mentioned, the standard idea of what we even call an ebook. And of course, we've heard that the definition of a book is changing. Even the definition of an ebook is changing slowly. And so whether it's fiction or nonfiction, we're simply still talking about some kind of file that you can market to an audience, that they can consume in some way, and that can produce a revenue stream of your choosing. It's not always the same as its print counterpart. In some ways it might have more content or it might have less. Since an e-file, an ebook file, basically is not limited to page sizes and how much the final print product will cost. It can actually contain a lot more information. At the same time, it might be strictly designed to be consumed on a small handheld device like a smartphone, and so it might have less information. So you might include more tables, charts, photographs, things like that in the print edition as opposed to the e-edition. And that would really depend strictly on your type of content and your audience. So if they're going to want to look at these great photographs, maybe you've got photographs you took for the news agency you work for, those would really be best seen on a larger device or a larger file. So it might not be right for your smartphone users. And you would want to include that in a print book. So it really depends on the type of content you're marketing. Now the traditional ebook file is meant to be used on lots of different devices. So you don't want to have to market, here's the smartphone edition, here's the iPad edition, here's the Kindle Reader edition. You want to make one file that really anyone can access from anywhere. And so that will be important and play a role in your decisions as you release the content, as far as, again, like I said, file size and the extra features that are included. And the type of device that your reader is going to use is really going to kind of correlate to the type of content it is. If this is just a quick romance read, again, if it's just a quick text-based ebook, it really wouldn't matter which device, as long as it was something the reader was comfortable using. Whereas if it was, for example, an academic paper or a digital textbook with hyperlinks, you would want that to be something that would be faster loading and have an easier use on the screen. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, short is the new long. This is a phrase I've heard a couple times recently, specifically in that webinar I mentioned. We keep hearing that digital reading is altering the way we read and not necessarily for the better, that our attention spans are changing, that we're getting used to reading in short bursts when we can. I'm having trouble seeing why that's a bad thing. If my choices are to stop everything I'm doing and sit down in a dedicated space with a full-size book or not read at all, I would far rather have an opportunity to read on the go when I could. And so what we're discovering is that readers and consumers are really responding to shorter works. This correlates also to how readers and consumers respond to pricing, which we'll talk about in a second. And so there's nothing wrong with releasing shorter content with a faster turnaround time. You do want to make sure that your quality is still as good as it can be. We're also hearing from both fiction and nonfiction that the consumers, they want constant streams of content to read. It's not enough to be given a book and told, here's the story, read it, great, I enjoyed it, maybe they'll review it, and then they're done. They don't want that. They want the opportunity to find out more, to go deeper into the text, even possibly to interact with the author, which we'll talk about as well. So this faster turnaround time means that content holders or rights holders are looking for ways to take their content, break it up into smaller sections, and monetize that at a smaller price. Even releasing the first editions at a lower price point, then shifting those to free once the next section comes out. And we're finding a lot of both fiction and nonfiction authors are finding success with that. So basically it's almost like taking the concept of a blog but creating it into a longer version, a freestanding book, and then producing the next set of content within a matter of weeks or months. And again, it's a way for consumers to really catch up with an author or a company that has content and be ready and willing to buy the next section that comes out. It's important to understand, though, we kept hearing at the initial early days of the digital revolution that ebooks are going to be the death of print books. No, they're not. We've come to figure out there is a market for both. There is a purpose and a focus for both an ebook or a print book. And again, as I said, those do not have to be carbon copies of each other. But print is not going away. And so it's still a really important part of your monetizing as a content holder. And so even if you released shorter works, as we've stated consumers are responding to, you might consider bundling a lot of those shorter works into a longer file or a longer print book. Okay, next. Okay, again, I told you I would talk about blog and blog to book. So as we've said, blog monetization involves things like selling ad space, being paid to feature or host a product or a review, and is often done through advertising. One other way we can do it is through paid subscriptions and through paywalls. If you're not familiar, a paywall is where you get to read so much of the article or a predetermined number of articles per day on this website, and then in order to read any more content, you have to be a paid subscriber. We're finding a lot of reluctance on the part of consumers to really take off with those models just because they're so used to finding free content online. So since they're used to this free access, there's almost like it kind of rubs them the wrong way to say, okay, you've read enough, now you're going to have to pay to read any more. However, if you've got a blog, you've got the instant makings of an ebook. there are actually WordPress plugins that will help you grab your content off your blog and organize it into a digital file that is almost ready to go out the door as an ebook. It will need a little bit of tweaking, and of course you'll want to have it edited, but at the same time, it's not the old days of having to cut and paste every single article into a Word document and then start from there. Okay, let's look again. Here's a great example of someone who's done really well with her blog. I don't remember if Hyperbole and a Half actually has advertising on it, but the author, Ali Brosh, has released a graphic novel of content from her blog. And it actually contains a lot of the same stories and a lot of the same images from her blog. And you might wonder, why would someone pay for a book when they can just read it for free on her website? That is a whole market that WordPress has made with its 30 million users, has basically blown the door open on that. On WordPress, Wattpad, users upload their stories for free. They do not get to charge for it. Readers can read it for free, and then those same readers at the end of this process are clamoring for the book edition. So when an author uploads more and more and more content to Wattpad, basically adding a chapter, adding a continuation, you'll start to find their fan base growing, and those fans want to buy the book. They want to have it, whether it's print or ebook. And the first author that I know, Brittany Garagatellis, was signed with Simon & Schuster for a 3-book deal based on content she had already posted for free to Wattpad that had millions of reads from Wattpad users. She was blown away. She thought, who would pay for this? Because it's all right there. Well, people don't want to sit there and have to just read it on Wattpad with a Wi-Fi connection, for example. And so they wanted to first be a part of rewarding her for her effort by paying for her content, but also they liked that ownership of it. They liked to have a copy, whether, again, it was print or digital. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, archived content. This is, as we said, it could be stuff that you've got stored on a server somewhere. It could be information from that drawer full of flash drives you've got. It might actually be things that will have to be scanned and digitized. And don't let that worry you. There are so many great services that can already do that for you, that can take these old things out of file cabinets and actually create your digital editions and do a really great job of it. But there's so many great stories out there, whether, again, your focus was historical information, which right off the bat already has a market, or whether it's those articles that were kind of forward-thinking in their day, and people are coming back to those articles and going, yeah, they were talking about this back in 2005. And it's happening, you know. So archived content, while it may not seem like it's going to be tomorrow's bestseller, it still is, first of all, a great source of information. It gives you, as the rights holder, a wealth of content that can be created as your own author library, so you've got a lot of information for your readers to enjoy. But also, it's an instant calling card. So even if you simply digitized it and made it available for free, it's that step where people read that content and then they're ready to pay for new content. So it's your value-added content. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Podcasts and videos. Okay, we said we would talk about these. A book is not only a book. I just said that an ebook, even that definition is changing from when we first were downloading stuff onto our Kindles through WhisperSync. So ebooks have evolved too in a very short amount of time. Podcasts are also great things to hyperlink inside a text-based ebook. Same with videos. So it would require a certain style of formatting, but it's a great value-added feature to include if you've already got them. And basically, if you think about the time, effort, or expense that was already spent the first time in creating the podcast or video, you've now opened up a whole new way to monetize on content that you've already created by including it in an updated version that, again, may even be text-based. So with those previous recordings, podcasts, okay, it can be repurposed as an audiobook, as an enhanced ebook. If you're in the right market, that would generate a textbook, for example, an academic work. It can be included in there, so as reference materials. There's just a wealth of ways that all this content can be used and does not just have to sit on a server somewhere. It's also being sold as these single unit information pieces. So you can actually use these maybe down the side of your website. So it's just, again, more content that your readers and your audience can appreciate and enjoy and keep them coming back for what you're going to produce next. Okay, let's look at the next one. Academic papers. Okay, again, these are the ones that you would not think are going to be the top bestsellers and people are standing in line to get your ebook of your academic works. But they really are, and especially now that library lending has opened up in such a big way for individual authors and for independent content rights holders. There's a whole audience now that can enjoy your academic papers, especially older stuff that you've already got. It can also be repurposed for things like MOOCs, so these free online open source classroom content. If your company is going to offer a webinar or a learning series, these academic papers that you've got are already that quote textbook to accompany the course you're going to offer. And so do not discount the fact that these academic papers that you already own the rights to, that you've already invested time and effort in, could be a source of revenue. So you can actually monetize some of these works that you've done. Whether the portfolio was on something you did to for angel investors for your startup, or again for an academic course, they can still appeal to someone. And I already talked about the person who's not only publishing his thesis as is, because it was certainly good enough to get him his master's degree, it's certainly something that a social worker or a teacher can want to read, but he's also repurposing the whole thesis into a more public-based and user-friendly version. Okay, another option is the publication of something that you've already got. And again, we're creating that reader's edition, but all of these are your calling card. So if you're basically looking at something that your company, your business, or your own career within your industry, if you're trying to get your foot in the door somewhere else, your ebook of your work is already your calling card. So it's almost like the digital resume of the future. So when someone's asking for your qualifications or why should they invest with your company, send them an ebook, and then they've got it right there. And they can come back to you. Again, want to keep it shorter, but they can come back to you with any questions about it. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Bundled content. This is becoming huge for any genre, any type of writing. Basically, it's just the recognition that your audience has limited time, limited funds, and basically a limited interest even. Why make it harder for your audience to come find the next thing you're going to write? If you've already released 3 shorter works in advance of your next work, go ahead and bundle those 3 so people who've not read the first or second or third can have all 3 in one location, or people who've read 1 and 2 know they're going to want all 5. So you can release all 5 if you've got other titles coming out. But bundled content is this value-added concept, and consumers really appreciate it. So it's one simple file they can download one time off your website, off a retail distributor, however they're going to get it, and they basically have all the content they need from you in one location, and they can sort through it, flip through it, read it cover to cover, whatever they want to do with it. It's a great way to look at your backlist as well. So if you have things that are already published, if you've already released some ebooks, for example, go ahead and release a whole new bundled version. There's nothing different about the content. You're just basically generating more interest and more buzz by releasing something new. You're just going to be aware that you will state wherever you're making it available, whether it's your website or a retailer, you do just want to state that this is just a bundle of the previous titles. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, so now you know that you have content that you want to monetize. What do you have to be able to do next? And here's a short list of some tools that you're really going to want to be familiar with in order to monetize on your content. And this is where we slide over into looking at somehow the promotion of what it is you're going to be monetizing. Social media. And there are so many social media sites out there, it can be a full-time job. And a lot of companies and even authors are turning to social media managers just to handle this aspect of monetizing. Don't discount the usual suspects. We all think of Facebook or LinkedIn even for our businesses. Don't discount things like Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest. Instagram and Pinterest especially are for whatever reason, becoming very important even in industry. So they're a social media site that a lot more people are turning to, especially if it's something professional based. A newsletter, this is vital. So a newsletter that you have a subscribership that continues to grow is really important in promoting and monetizing new content. And one of the best ways to get people to sign up for your newsletter is to provide old content, whether you're giving it to them free or not. So basically, your free gift for signing up is this ebook that we released last year. Again, it's sitting there. You've already done the work. You might as well use that as your calling card. Having a blog or other website where not just that it's there for people to look at and to read, but where they get to interact. So, and as you'll see, that ties right in along with the next bullet, the ability to produce a forum or a comment section. While people do like to trash talk about the trolls on the internet, we do like to know that we have a voice, that others are able to hear it, and that we are able to contribute to a discussion. Just looking at a static website and seeing your information, that's not going to keep people coming back. You want to have some ability where they can interact with what you're saying. Again, an ebook where you get to monetize is a great tool for that. So if your ebook is available on your website, having a section where they can share it, where they can respond to it, talk about it, is really important. Archiving your materials, okay, and again, that is a tool that you need to learn to master, not just in actually physically creating the digital edition, but in that you want to know what things are you supposed to be selling out there from your archives. So it's not just a matter of taking some article you wrote 10 years ago and slapping it up as an ebook somewhere. You have to understand your audience and your readership, understand the people who already come to your website or your blog, and see what things they would be impressed by. What would they be motivated to actually click buy? And that's how you monetize your archive. But using traditional forms of media, we act as though the entire internet has taken over, but there are still newspapers, TV shows, radio shows, things like that, that are still great sources of promotion for the content you plan to monetize. So make sure that you're still in touch with some of these other avenues. Review and book promotion sites, those tend to be a lot more important for fiction than for nonfiction. Of course, if it's a scholarly review site or an academic review site, then that may be the ideal source of promotion for your content that you're going to release. And the last, you cannot overlook the public library space. Whether or not people seem to be using their public libraries, they still are vital in their communities. And most of the libraries that are taking hold and are being revitalized in these communities are the ones who are adopting technology and whose library staff are able to help people with technology. And so if you're digitizing content, that's a great source as reaching out to these libraries who are already invested in doing things a little differently. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, I said we would talk about price, and price does matter. Okay, it's not how great your content is if the price is all wrong. There are so many studies that have come out now. Companies like Kobo, Goodreads, and Smashwords have all released studies over the years telling us where people pay, what they're willing to pay for a book. And it doesn't matter if it's a James Patterson or if it's some guy up the street from your house who's written a book. There are price points that consumers are willing to invest. Obviously, the more well-known the author, the more money that a consumer feels comfortable paying for their content, mostly because they know what to expect. But since we're discovering that consumers really expect ebooks to be priced so much less than their print counterparts, and even there, they want them priced less than a Big Mac, we're finding out that $2.99 to $4.99 is really what consumers are comfortable paying. And this speaks back to that short is the new long. We really want to make sure that if consumers are willing to pay $2.99 for your book, that they're not getting $8.99 worth of book. And I know that might sound a little shady. It's really not that. If you've done the work on writing a book or compiling your content in such a way that it would have garnered $8.99 in a bookstore, then why are you giving it away for $2.99? When you could easily break that up into different sections that you can monetize and sell at a smaller size and again, generate that user following so that people are waiting for your next piece of content. There are lots of great reports about this, and you can find those again. Kobo, Smashwords, and Goodreads have all released data on the surveys they've conducted among their users, saying where people tend to spend their money. Okay, next slide. Since price is so important in monetizing your ebook, don't overlook the value of free. Free is not a bad thing. If I'm an unheard of fiction author, I really don't want to list my ebook for free on Amazon, for example, because I'm not getting anything out of it. First of all, I could actually, in some locations, be charged a download fee where I got to pay the fee for that. But more importantly is you're giving away your content, of course, and you want to make sure that that is purposeful if you're doing that. When I said that price matters and that there's such a thing as too cheap, there is this mindset that if the book was free or 99 cents, in the consumer's minds they could be thinking, the author didn't even think it was worth $1, why should I? And so that's why we say there is such a thing as too cheap, unless your free is purposeful. So if you are using this free book to generate interest in your next book, your next title, or your next paper or document, then that's a very purposeful means. So as I said before with prior to bundling, if you sold books 1, 2, and 3 and then gradually lowered the price on those as your next one comes out, then that is purposeful and that will resonate in the minds of consumers. So they will understand that this book is free for a certain time period, or it is free because I signed up for the company's newsletter. So like I said, there's a reason for that to be free other than you just didn't feel like your material was worth paying for. And again, this is true for fiction or nonfiction. This is a great strategy for authors who have a fiction series where, again, the next book is coming out. Or if you're a company or any kind of business, then free is a great gift that you're giving to someone for doing something, such as signing up for your newsletter or subscribing to your blog. It's a gateway that gets people attention. And so if you look at this as the calling card where people will want to see what your next content is and be willing to pay for it, then free is purposeful. A great study came out from Kobo that was actually looking at how consumers engage with ebooks in public libraries. And I'm sorry, they found this actually to be true of print as well, that readers who had checked out book 1 in the series were more likely to go buy book 2 because they didn't want to wait for it to come to the library. And so that was especially true of ebooks. If there was the option to press a buy button within the document, that even readers who didn't finish, readers who made it, I believe it was 2/3 of the way through the book, were willing to buy the book because their time was up, the document had disappeared from their device or from their account because it was returned back to the library system, and so they were willing to buy it after reading so much of it for free. Okay, next slide. Okay, lending. As I just left off on libraries, lending is just like free, only better, because you can actually monetize lending. There are a lot of platforms that have opened up now. Of course, we have Scribd and Oyster. We've for years had 24 Symbols, which serves much of Europe, and of course, Overdrive is one of the digital media sources for over 30,000 libraries in the U.S. Overdrive has worked with Smashwords to put content in the Overdrive catalog. So basically the way, and I'm sorry, of course I've skipped Kindle Unlimited, which is brand new. It's another subscription service. So basically the way these work, depending on how the consumer finds your content, whether it's a public library, an academic library, or through the subscription service, you are paid in a different revenue platform based on was it subscription or lending. So for Oyster, Scribd, and Kindle Unlimited, every time someone borrows your book, for which they are willing to take a chance because it technically didn't cost them anything extra over their monthly membership. For every time a book is borrowed through one of those services, and I believe the threshold is 10%, if the reader makes it through 10%, then it is considered a one-unit sale for that model. and how that pays out to the author. Now, it's a little different for Overdrive, because if a book is uploaded through Smashwords and is eligible for the Overdrive catalog, a library still has to buy it. And so there still has to be some kind of connection to the library to get them to invest in your book. And again, just like they would do if they bought your print book, the library only has to pay once. And so you get one sale for a library buying one copy. Of course, that one copy can only be loaned out once at a time, excuse me, and so only one user at a time. And so if they found that the content was something more people wanted, they could buy more copies from Overdrive and have the ability to loan that out. In all of these cases, you're basically letting people look at your content for free, but you're getting paid for it by taking the step to put it in these platforms. Just know that there are some eligibility requirements. For example, in Smashwords, it has to be formatted to a certain style. There's no fee for Smashwords to send it over to Overdrive and to include it in our catalog. For Kindle Unlimited, the book is only available for sale on Amazon, so it can't be in the Overdrive catalog, for example. It can't be available through Oyster and Scribd. Again, for example, Oyster and Scribd, while we're on that topic, have a great relationship with Smashwords, and that's another great way to get your book listed in the Oyster and Scribd catalogs. But this is especially important even for academic libraries, for those academic papers we talked about, theses, archived articles, and content. There are plenty of academic libraries and university libraries, of course, who use Overdrive. So if you've got content that you can digitize and put through the Smashwords catalog to the correct standards, you can get it listed with all these academic libraries. And again, it just takes a matter of those libraries deciding they need your content and simply making the purchase through their Overdrive catalog. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. But how do you generate that word of mouth? As we just left off, libraries have access to buy your book. It doesn't mean they will buy it. So how do you get people talking about your content? Well, again, the great way to do that is to meet them where they are. And that goes back to those tools that I said you really have to master before you can monetize your content. Your social media, different other publications and other websites where people are already talking about your topic or your content theme, being a guest poster on content, having it included in your bio, even something as simple as your email signature, having your book listed there or your content listed there. There are promotion companies that, depending on the type of content you're trying to monetize, can help you with that. And of course, there has to be something for them to share and discuss before people can talk about it. And again, one of the great ways to do that is this concept of owning the shelf. Make sure you have lots of material that readers can find and discover and that they can enjoy. One of my favorite authors always says the best promotion for book 1 is to write book 2. And of course that carries on down the line. The best promotion for book 12 is to write book 13. And especially if you're sitting on older content or if you've got works that could be broken up into smaller segments and sold at a lower price point, you're already sitting on books 1 through 5 potentially. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, the power of volume. I just alluded to that remark, own the shelf. And again, this is great advice from that promotion webinar I've mentioned. Too many authors put that content out there and then they sit back and wonder why their books are not selling. First of all, did you generate any kind of discussion before the book came out? Has this future book you're going to release been listed on your website, on your blog, on your social media? Have you been talking about it even before it comes out? Companies like Smashwords and Amazon have already opened up pre-orders, so you can take pre-orders for a book, and that way you're generating a lot more discussion and activity and even rankings before the book actually appears. Again, as I just said, the best way to promote that book is to get to work on the next one you're going to release, whether it's brand new content that you haven't written yet or an article that your team is going to release in 2 weeks. Have that ready to release that content in some way to an ebook audience. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a romance series or your college thesis. Just make sure that you've got something to follow it up. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Okay, This is one that kind of rubs people the wrong way, I think, because it is a tremendous amount of work to be a guest poster. You have the responsibility of producing great content that you're probably not going to get paid for. You have to make sure it's up to great standard, it's well researched and well thought out, and then you have to do the follow-up work of sharing it even though you're sharing someone else's website. So guest posting is a tremendous amount of work, but it does stand to give you great benefits in terms of searchability, discoverability for your book, promotion of your book, again, by mentioning it in your bio and hyperlinking there. Again, so as I said, it can seem like it's a thankless chore, but there really is a lot of power behind it. So when you have the opportunity to write some material for another website, another blog, someone else's online journal, don't necessarily just skip over it by throwing up your hands and saying, I'm too busy. First of all, you could actually negotiate the rights to publish that yourself in a later work of your own. So if the person who's hosting you on their website does not mind you publishing it in one of your books, you again have done all that work to create your own content that you can monetize later. But do make sure you check with that person before you do so. It's actually, they're considered the one who published your work for you when you are a guest poster. But more importantly, these add to your overall credibility. So whatever your topic is, whether you're writing about being a romance writer or a science fiction writer, or whether you're writing something for your industry or your profession, it adds to the searchability, so you're more easily found when you're Googled or on LinkedIn. Google Plus sharing of your article that you've written for someone else will increase exposure for your name, and of course get more people talking about you, as we just said, with your generating word of mouth. So there's a lot of benefit to be gained from appearing on someone else's website. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, book promotion sites. This is more of a problem, I would say, for fiction authors than for nonfiction or for historical or archived content or academic content. There are a lot of websites out there, a lot of companies that will take your money and do everything from create a full promotional publicity campaign, which is awesome, down to we'll tweet about your book 3 times a day for the next 2 weeks. You know, so there's a wide range, unfortunately. So really make sure you're doing your homework. If you're letting someone else handle promoting your material that you are trying to monetize, you want to make sure that you're not being sent in the wrong direction. And again, we want to meet those readers where they are. If you've hired someone to share about your book through social media channels, but their audience on their traffic is not right for your content, then that was a waste of your time and money. Okay, also keep in mind that these promotion services can put your book in front of readers. It doesn't mean they can make people buy them. It just means they can make people see them. So make sure before you go with a professional promotion company that it's something you have the budget for and that you are prepared to do your own legwork in conjunction with. Okay, let's move forward. Most important, be available. One thing we're finding with today's readers is it doesn't matter if they're reading the next James Patterson book or if they're reading, again, this author's work on his master's thesis. They want to be able to engage if they choose. They want the ability to know that their discussion will be heard, that their questions will be answered, and even if they just like your book and want to tell you, great job, can't wait to read your next one, they want to know that you're going to answer that you will respond. So one of the most important things you can do is have a contact form on your website. Make sure you're actually answering it and that you are genuinely responding. Do not send out auto responses. Make sure it's something that pertains to what the person originally initiated with their reach out. And it's a good idea to put this in the book itself. So make sure you're mentioning in the back of the book, you know, hey, would appreciate a review. If you have any questions, you're free to email me at this address, or free to check out my website here. I respond to all inquiries. And it lets people know that their time and their money were valuable to you, and that you are recognizing what they invested by reading your book. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Okay, it seems we're ready for some questions.
Well, thank you, Mercy. This has definitely been a very informative webinar. The first question that has come in is, how do you monetize something with a market that is so flooded with content?
That has been a problem since day one, and it doesn't matter if you're monetizing an ebook, a print book, an app, if you're someone who makes money on YouTube, it is very difficult. The very first thing you can do is make sure that your content is going to rise to the top by being top-notch. It's very important to make sure that your work is fully edited and that it's been thoroughly checked over to make sure it's still relevant, especially if you're using archived content, and that it has a reason to be discussed. And then, as I just finished up by saying, make sure there's ways in the back of the material, whether it's at the end of the file, back of the print book, something mentioned on your website, make sure there's ways that it's easy for people to share your content and to engage with it.
Great, thank you. The next question that's come in is, does ebook pricing change depending on the genre?
Absolutely. Yes, it does. If I'm reading a quick romance novella, I'm happily going to pay 99 cents for it and not wonder about the quality. But if I find a book, for example, some really involved spy thriller that's 200 pages long, 99 cents might seem a little odd to me. At the same time, just because it's 200 or 400 pages long does not mean I'm willing to pay $10.99 for an ebook, which I do unfortunately find authors trying to sell. We do find a higher price point often in nonfiction, depending on how it's written. If it's supposed to be a down-to-earth instructional guide from someone who's experienced this firsthand, that might feel more like fiction to some people, not in terms of the content and its credibility, but in terms of the style of writing. We're just accustomed to paying a lot more for academic content because we're used to those industry experts behind it and the people who've had to take their time out to write the content. So absolutely, price will change based on the kind of writing it is.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The next question that's come in is, are there concerns that the shorter turnaround time means a lower quality of ebook, and won't readers notice?
Yes and no. If I were just to go to a retailer, and we'll just pick any retailer, doesn't matter, and I see that a particular author or company or publisher has 10 books that were all released this month, that might raise eyebrows. That might cause some suspicion. So I hate to suggest that you should purposely sit on your content and not share it just for the sake of propriety and how it looks, but that is certainly a consideration. At the same time, if you've got this 400-page document that you are monetizing in smaller sections, then there's no reason to spend an artificial amount of time sitting on the content when you know it was all originally edited and made great the first time. So when it was a 400-page document, you did the work of the editing and the proofreading and the formatting. So there is that you would just want to wait a reasonable amount of time, but you don't want to wait so long that your readers have found someone else to read. You want them to continue to read. And again, it's not a competition. You don't have to worry that people have moved on and will not read your content anymore. It's more a matter of it's not as much in their mindset, and they're not looking for your content. So what you lose out on is you're basically, if you wait too long between your books, then you're basically starting at square one, having to promote and reach out to readers again and generate that interest in your content.
Thank you, Mercy. The next question that's come in is, please explain the blog again. Is that making a book of the older posts, perhaps on a specific content for the academic audience?
Okay, yes, and there are some interesting things you will have to keep in mind. So if you already have a blog or a news blog of content, you will of course need to section that. So where you post content possibly as it's timely and on a topic-by-topic basis as it pertains to current events, that doesn't mean that you can just go straight down your calendar of blog posts and turn that into a book. So you would need to spend some time possibly with even a content editor who's going to sit and match up your content. You'll need to look at, should it be posted chronologically, and again, is that reverse order or chronological order? But you also might find that there's some repetition if you get them out of order. So you don't want to allude to something in the book and then go back 3 posts later in your book and have a post where you're initially talking about it again, if that makes sense. So you'll want to pay close attention to how you organize your topics within this book and how you organize your chronology in the book.
Great, thank you. The next question has come in is, what are some of the best websites for book promotion?
Well, that is going to depend entirely on what you've written. So again, there's so many great book bloggers out there that will work in fiction, that will even work in nonfiction if it's topical. I know a nonfiction one, for example, that specifically shares content written by baby boomers. It's actually called boomerscafe.com. And so, again, you would have to just do your searching there. Once you've searched for different platforms that will meet your content's needs, that's when the true homework starts, is going and spending some time on their websites. Even if it's something that you're going to have to pay for, I even recommend signing up to receive their newsletters or their mailings so you can see exactly what people will see when you pay to have your content included. So there's nothing wrong with signing up for some of these websites just to see what will happen to your book when you pay to include it. That's when the homework begins.
Well, thank you so much, Mercy. That was a great answer, and thank you again for this very informative webinar. At this time, if there's no other questions, I would like to thank everyone for attending. Let's give it a couple of seconds, just in case anything else comes in. In the meantime, our next webinar will be tomorrow, Thursday, September 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, titled Product Instructions, the Missing Piece of the Customer Experience, being presented by Sharon Burton, a content strategy consultant. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. You can access the recorded version of this webinar beginning tomorrow, the webinar archive section of our website, located at www.dclab.com. Thank you again, everyone, for attending. This concludes today's broadcast, and have a great day. Thank you.